is working now. Okay, sorry about this. We had a technical glitch that required the complete reset of the computer to allow the microphone to work. So this is typical Microsoft, okay? You know, I'm not going to let you do anything until you do what I want you to do. Power. That is what power is. Power, in other words, what Bacon and Hobbes had physics envy. They thought science, they wanted politics to be a science, right? And the best science at this time was physics. Okay, and physics is still one of the most dominant sciences still out there. Okay, and it has the most ability, like, to make things, technology, create things. You know, science is therefore political scientists like Hobbes took physics as hold on. Hi there. Can I give you this and you can take the quiz and not get a 0 today from this, and you can just give it back to me when you're done?
Can I?
A pen?
No, I have a pen, but I'm thinking about the list.
Oh, okay. Yeah. You can do the list also. Sorry. Okay, there's the list also. Thank you. Let's bring it up when you're done. So Hobbes wanted to use the word power, which was always there, but never a theme. And even Machiavelli doesn't talk about power per power. Why? Because power is such a vacuous word. So what it means what? It means doing things, usually. The action to do something, right? And power is nothing more than what? The ability to get what you want. Hobbes coined it in his Leviathan and his other works. He would coin power as the ability to get what you... So therefore, everyone in my colleagues who talk about power, right, really don't know what the hell they're really talking about, because power is a meaningless term in one sense. It's so vague. It's a universal term that explains the ability to get what you want. And the ability not only to get what you want is to get others. You know, this is why what Hobbes is doing is saying, oh my God. See, Machiavelli talks about arms, right? Arms, you know, arms within your arms to grasp, to take, but also the arms of weapons to grasp and to take. He uses the metaphor. The arms, which are, the arms are the ability to what? To take, to make, to do, to shape, to act, right? So arms are like this concept of so there are, in other earlier writers, including Aristotle, there will be these references to arms, to ability to do things, to take, to grab, to do things that state that the political actors always will engage in. It's with Hobbes that the focus becomes on power, right? And power is always about the ability to get other people to do, to get what you want, and to get other people to do what you want, to do, to help you get this. Now, the traditional way was, there's, you know, Aristotle Politics 4 has this at Politics 5, at the end of chapter 4, he has this wonderful, chapter 4, he has this wonderful little thing. There's 3 ways to get people to do what you want. Persuade them, con them, or fraud, commit fraud, lie, cheat, lie to them, seduce, fraud, or force them, coercion, threats, or actually use force against them. Those are the classic 3 mechanisms to get other people to do what you want. Machiavelli prefers force. Force and fraud is the easiest way, because what Machiavelli kind of reduces persuasion and fraud together. Like he reduces laws and arms together. Machiavelli does these tricks where he says, okay, you need good laws, you need good arms. But if you don't have good laws, you won't have good arms. Therefore, we might as well just talk about good arms. Right? Because the laws, if you talk about good arms, you automatically are presuming good laws. See, this is a classic Machiavelli trick. And Machiavelli does the same thing with force and fraud. He talks about frost and fraud, leaving out persuasion because why? Persuasion and fraud are the same thing. It's to what? Do by words. Therefore, force is to do by violence or do by the threat of violence, where fraud and persuasion are to do by words and doesn't care about the good or bad. Okay? Machiavelli doesn't really care about whether you do. The only thing that matters is that the people are benefiting. That's why he doesn't really care about justice. Justice is an inconvenient thing. Usually justice gets bad. People who worry about justice often ends up suffering and making their people suffer. Yeah. It's better to appear to be good versus to be good. Because, and even Weber talks about this, the dirty hands problem. Political action, statecraft, always requires the political actor to have dirty hands. You're always going, because, what's his name, the famous German statesman Bismarck said, since politics is sausage making, and sausage making is a dirty business, you need strong stomachs and strong hands. If you don't have a strong stomach, you're going to hate politics. You're not suited for it, the argument is. If you don't have the ability, and if you want to have clean hands, forget about it. Okay? So therefore we have a fundamental problem here in the sense that power is always about what? Hard power is using carrots and sticks. What are carrots? I'm using a metaphor, carrots and sticks, right? Carrots are rewards or inducements. They can be financial, they can be, it can be many ways you can give inducements. Status, honor, give people honor, give people status, give people, in other words, there's many ways that I can do things to get people to reward inducements. Hard power is always about either inducements or sticks, carrots and sticks. Inducements or punishments, or threats and punishments, okay? In other words, you can use military might or an economic means to influence the behavior or interest of other political bodies or other parts of the city even. This form of, in other words, you can do both. You can use these hard power both domestically and externally, okay? So anything that's an inducement or anything that's a characteristic, an inducement or threat or punishment is hard power. So is economics hard power? Giving people jobs, hiring, firing them. Giving contracts to people, not giving contracts to people. You understand? This is the reality. This is we're talking about this, why economics is an aspect of very much a tool of statecraft. But it's a kind of hard power too. Many of these tools will be, you'll notice something, will be, the tools will be, see, we're going to be specifically talking about tools, but some of these tools will be more soft power than hard power. But some will be mixed. Okay? Now, hard power is always about what it is about. The form of political power is often aggressive, coercion, yet not necessarily you need military violence or force. The most immediate effective when imposed by one body upon another of usually lesser military or economic power. You can, in other words, coercion. In other words, one of the most common forms of social coercion is what? Inclusion. Exclusion. Peer pressure. What do you think peer pressure is? You're part of my group. I like you, so you can come play with us. I don't like you. You can't join us. What are you doing? You're excluding and including, and therefore doing what? You can punish people and reward them. You can reward people you like, or you want to bring someone, you want to influence someone to be on your side. You include them in your activities. You reward them. You give inducements to them. You form relationships with them. You play nice with them. You give them things. Hopefully they will reciprocate, and then when it's time, like Machiavelli says, what is the purpose of friends? To spend, Machiavelli has this great line in The Prince. What is the purpose of, friends really it takes efforts to build friends. People you buy with money won't be there for you. Real friends are the people who you've gained because you shared things, you really used because of who you are, your character, your virtue. Real friendship is something that's really good. That's of course I would like to teach friendship, because friendship is one of the most, in Aristotle there's a big 2 books of the ethics is about friendship. Friendship is the most important concept there is in political anthropology in that sense. It's not genetic, it's not family, it's not child making and things like this. It's completely voluntary. It is the truly voluntary action. And there's 3 types of friendship. There's friendships of utility, friendships of pleasure, and 4. There's friendship of shared experience, and then finally friendships of virtue. Okay, people character. They like your character, right? People, they say, oh, you're a good person. I want to be around you. In other words, and not every friendship is based on the same thing. Someone might be attracted to the other person because of pleasure, and the other person is attracted to that because of virtue. Not virtue, or utility. Come on, this is most likely the old man and young girl, right? Because surely her vintage is going to be economic, right? The benefits of having the old, or maybe he likes her. No, it could also be she can like him because of his character, his status is important in life, right? So there's utility or character issues. Whereas sometimes he is going to look at her how in the terms of pleasure, right? This is the classic concept. Usually 2 people with pleasure. Pleasure is usually a young person's game. Utility is an older person's game. Older people only tend to get together and work together because of utility. That's another Aristotle point. But why am I talking about this? Because friendship is one of these important things, and Machiavelli's his line about friendship. Real friends are hard to come by, right? But these are the friends you need to spend when the time's in trouble. When you're in crisis, when you're in a political moment, when you need to do something, you're going to have to spend your friends. The people, therefore, the allies and the people that you've made friendships with, you're going to have to call in the card and ask them to do something. Okay, that's hard. Even friendship is a form of hard power. In this sense, friendship at one frame is like soft power, right? But at another level, no, because why? It's also utility. It's based on utility. Usually friendships that last longest are the utility relation friendships. Pleasure friendships die. The ones that actually shared experience, but the problem is what happens, you don't live together anymore. You have to, if you've had a shared experience, a traumatic or dramatic shared experiment, you're always going to feel like brothers, right? But then what happens, you're no longer in the same area anymore, you're far away. You can't rely on it. Maybe you could. Maybe say in time of crisis, you could say, come help me. And you could rely on that, but it's going to be more difficult. Whereas the person who you're living with at that time moment is. So therefore, this is the problem with soft power, hard power. Soft power is the power because people like you. Now, I didn't ask you to read it. I'm not going to do it because usually it's the famous author of the guy who coined soft power was Joseph Nye in 1990 in his Bounds to Lead, a book about the United States, and he says he coined the term kind of. He talked about it. He said it was America has all this soft power, this power to get because people like America. People has, in other words, it's power to co-opt. He said he used the word co-opt, and I said I really think co-opt is the wrong word. He means, and I think what happens here is that soft power is tied to the term charisma. Weber's concept of charisma. And I think in a lot of ways, Mr. Nye unconsciously did not realize how much of Weber he was relying on in that sense. Because he never really cites Weber on charisma. He will mention charisma on once or 2 things, but he won't talk about soft power and charisma. And what is soft power? Soft power is very much in the eyes of the beholder. It depends on how the other person responds to you. In other words, I myself can't create myself soft power. Soft power is really generated in the eyes by other people. And usually how much they're attracted to who I am, whether I'm a nation or a person. They like me, and therefore they're willing to do things for me. You understand? I don't force them. They do it. I can probably get them to do what I want because they like me so much. Or they like what I represent. Or the country represents. And therefore, sometimes things are associated with me. Like maybe I have a business or two or something like this. I'm a country. And of all these businesses that are associated with my country, like McDonald's, you know the story of McDonald's. McDonald's purposefully caught the guy who really made McDonald's, not the real people, the two families, McDonald brothers. If the McDonald brothers were left with McDonald's, no one would know about McDonald's. If it wasn't for the Kosh, how do I say his name? I can never say his name. It's a Slavic name. Ray Kosh. He created McDonald's as a brand. Why? Because he associated with America. In fact, the movie The Founder, it does a very good job explaining it. I mean, it's the movies. Again, this is wrong with a lot of movies. A lot of movies want to make the movie make it about him being a bad guy. He's the hero. He's not yes, he might have used not so nice means, but McDonald's as we know it, and as a symbol, as a thing, he was the person who understood the real meaning of what the two brothers were trying to do. What it symbolized, and what was the potential of it as a marketing device, to market a brand. Okay? And why? McDonald's then he associated it with America, and therefore because it was associated with America, it became associated with America. Therefore, it became to represent American. In other words, people would say, and I remember colleagues here. There was a colleague, she died, she was one of the sociology teachers here. She died in a car killed her like about a decade ago by accident, in an accident. But she used to talk about Americanization, right? The Americanization of Poland. What is that? KFC, McDonald's, right? This is the Americanization. And this is soft power. Nye would call this soft power. Well, yes and no. Why? Because come on. Why did McDonald's and KFC win? Why did places like McDonald's and KFC destroy all the little other stores? Most of you are not old enough. 20, 30 years ago in Poland, you went out in the street and got street food. What was the quality of the street food? Domain level. Trying to eat a hamburger, you would risk your life with food poisoning of 30 years ago, what constituted a hamburger or a hot dog. Even today, a lot of the hot dogs you get at like weird places and vendors are kind of like, right? What does McDonald's do? It standardizes a certain level of expectation. A clean bathroom. Finding a clean, 20 years ago, trying to find a clean bathroom in a public clean bathroom in this part of the world was next to impossible. Okay? You understand how that changes behavior and it changes expectations of people? You'd go there because what? The quality of the food is uniform. It's not, you go to the McDonald's here, you go to McDonald's half the city, the next city away. The burger is identical. Whereas you go to local stop, Bobby Joe's over here and Bobby Joe's over here. They're completely different. Now, that's not true anymore because why? Because they learned, they imitate. Actually, they didn't imitate. They went to England to learn short cooking. All those Poles who went to work in India, in English and then came back with English equipment, all of a sudden started the restaurant revolution, right? The little short restaurant revolutions. Short cooking, okay? That's why you have all these little burger places and things now, right? This is unthinkable 20 years ago. Now, and this little point here was to make a point. This is how soft power and hard power interconnects. McDonald's becomes ability to symbolize American interests, right? But is it really? How effective is soft power? No, it's your likability. It's the same thing with charisma. It is exactly what charisma. In other words, charisma is the ability, and charisma depends on the beholder, not the actor. Charisma is in the eyes of the beholder, because the opposite can happen. For everything that's charismatic, there's the opposite of charismatic. That's repulsion. So a McDonald'sization at one level is positive, but another level, McDonald'sization is considered, some people would look at it as, oh my God, that's horrible. How could you, oh, the world is going to hell. Come on. I mean, ironically, that's aristocratic. In other words, aristocratic sensibilities. But the people who hate commercialization are really aristocrats. Even if they say they're leftists, they're not. They don't like the common person. They want an elite world where they and their friends can have nice food and nice things, when the rest of you guys have slosh. Okay? That's Makuza. Makuza is a hypocrite in this. All these new left writers are basically German elitists. The German professorate, with very high status of what they were. A German professor is the God on earth. Okay? Polish professors are God on earth. Trust me, I know them. Half of them are horrible people. They think they're God and they can do what they want and they're above the law. Okay, this is the way it is. There's no equality. Being a professor is being part of the aristocracy. Okay, you're something above, and therefore that's why everyone wants to get the doctor on their name. Like, why? I mean, in America, anyone puts PhD in back. If you're not teaching a course or doing something at an academic institution, the only people who put PhD after their names or their doctoral degree, because sometimes they have EDDs, education doctors and things like this, or demand to have doctor, if you're not a medical doctor, to have doctor, is the biggest fraud in the world. Biggest poser, biggest, any clown who has an education degree and demands to be called doctor something deserves ridicule. I would never call myself Dr. Bates in America. In fact, in class, I'd call myself Mr. Bates. In fact, at the Ivy League schools, they would never call you doctor or anything. It's Mr. So why? This is the perception of differentiation, of status. Okay, in this part of the world, you're still very much a peasant / aristocratic culture still. You're not a civic culture yet. You don't have a civic identity of equality. You're trying to, but it's been destroyed so many times, and we took it. And the new version of civil equality is even more odious, because it's kind of burned on a kind of urban. It's now an urban versus rural distinction, where the real civic bodies are your urban intellectuals and your urban professional elites, right? That's the whole nature of this. And that's a big problem in political reality, because, hate to say it, urban elites are the scum of the earth usually. Urban societies are the most violent, most unstable things that there are. The urban masses are more violent and rapacious. In other words, the urban situation, the rural poor can feed themselves. The urban poor cannot. Therefore, they steal and rob. The urban poor is much more violent, rapacious and violent in the destructive sense. The rural poor is violent, but because it has its own property and has some things like this, its destructiveness is usually positive. Okay? So you have a differentiation of the poor and you have a differentiation of the rich. The rich and the rural rich are never going to be super rich. The urban rich are going to be super rich. And if you're super rich, what happens with that? You believe you're above everyone. You're better than everyone. You're gods. Just go to, where's this place? Where's that nightclub in the, go on a Saturday night to one of the most exclusive nightclubs in Warsaw. It used to be across from the National Theater.
Is it Soko?
Yeah, one of those, and go to the elite nightclubs and watch. And you know, that made me I mean, I was dragged there from friends for a decade, and I used to be against the French Revolution. But after watching a decade of the children of the Polish elite and their their expensive Lamborghinis and their expensive clothes and they go shopping. I lived right next for a decade. I lived right next to Wolf, the Wolf building. What do you call it? The luxury store, Wolf Braca, the Braca building, Braca Street. This big 10-floor things where you have all the big famous luxury name brands. Like it has, right in the ground floor has that famous, what is that? Those Harble bags, women bags that all women like, the expensive ones. It's right on Jerzy right before Rondo de Gaulle. It's Wolf Braca building. It's the what? Okay, Vitzkatz, yes. Vitzkatz.
That's where the compensable designers.
Yes, it's and I used to live there for 10 years. I saw the people who went there, and the cars they drove, and who they were. And before that, for 20 years, I've seen these people. And what they make me? They made me an advocate of a Jacobin. I became a Jacobin. I long for the days of the guillotine. I was a conservative. Before coming to Europe and spending 20 years in Poland, I was a kind of a Burkean conservative, a horror at the revolutionary. But after 2 decades watching them, behave and do things, I became a Jacobin. Viva the revolution! Viva Madame Guillotine! Okay, why? Because of disgust. Disgust. The way they behave can disgust people. In fact, this is the politics of revulsion and disgust. So, therefore, this is the hard soft power problem. These are the instruments of statecraft are very straightforward. There are, like, we have about 8 of them. Today we'll talk about the first 4. Next week we'll talk about the last 4. Administration, law, culture, and this is double one: education and culture, economics, diplomacy, force, intelligence, and communication. Okay, let's talk about administration. What is administration? Well, administration is the execution of function. In other words, the various office and actors executing the laws and policy for the governing regime. Bureaucracy is the most contemporary form of administration. Okay? And the man who gives us the characteristic of bureaucracy, is Weber. And I actually included the extra reading of this simply in the campus platform from the section, because I think it's found in the it can be found in the Waters Chapter 6, Water and Waters Chapter 6 reading. But I wanted to take that specific paragraph from bureaucracy. And I'm going to quote little bits of it here. Because here he kind of gives 6 specific characteristics, and then of the 6, there's 3 here. He goes, 1, the modern officialdom functions in the following manner. He gives 6 ways of doing it. And he goes, the one is there is a principle of fixed and official judicial jurisdictional areas. What a jurisdiction is? A jurisdiction is like a certain function, some certain function. A jurisdiction can be defined functionally, territorially, or in terms of a class or a group or an area of who you're servicing. In other words, who you're servicing. Either it can be a class of people, or it can be a group of people. Usually class. Class means more than simply like a social class. It also can mean like a class, like let's say, I'm going to give licenses to businesses. So I service businesses. I'm going to service people wanting to have. I'm going to people driving driver's license. So it's tied to I supervise the issuing of licenses for drivers. Right. That's a very specific functionality, type of service and function. So function dealing with what? All citizens, so therefore everyone, okay? Or within this district, or that district, or that district. In other words, bureaucracies will often be territorially defined, sometimes functionally defined. So by function or something like this. He goes, and they're ordained by rules that are by laws, administrative regulations, okay? He goes 3 ways. The regular activities required for the purposes of for the bureaucracy governed structure are distributed in fixed ways as official duties. So therefore, the bureaucrat has duties to carry out. His regulation says he has to do certain things. What? He has to make sure he executes. Some people are collecting the information. They collect requests. They process it. Some people are in charge of deciding whether this gets done or not, and who's to be assigned to execute or to fulfill the request or of the order. So you have a whole process that the bureaucracy itself regulates and manages. So bureaucracy is not only the delivering of services, it's the overseeing of the delivery of those services. It's therefore the structuring, the function of how those services are to be delivered, and also often either the contractor, because sometimes services are not directly guaranteed. In other words, they will contract third parties to do it, or they will authorize agents of the state to do it. Okay, or they will have the team within the bureaucracy itself will execute it. Okay, like education. Education policy is a perfect example of this, right? We'll talk about this. Why? Because in Poland it's all nationalized. Even though the local actors and teachers are nothing more than tools, even though they may be hired by a local administrator, but the local administration is directly under the authority of the minister. There's levels of territoriality of administration, but they're still centrally controlled from a centralized administrator in the European model. Okay, so therefore, this idea of that it requires regular activities required for the purposes for the bureaucratically governed structures are distributed in a fixed way as official duties, and the authority to give the commands required for the discharge of those duties is distributed in a stable way. In other words, this is the thing about this. Stability. Bureaucracy, modern bureaucracy, older functions were, in other words, it's an ad hoc. A political ruler makes an ad hoc decision, go do this, and assigns a person to do it. A bureaucratic way does this. All these things are systematized, regularized, routinized, okay? Routinization of authority, of administration. A bureaucracy is what signifies bureaucracies, modern bureaucracies, is the routinization. Routine. It's made routine of administration. And therefore, it gives command strictly to, it says, in a stable way and strictly delimited by rules concerning the coercive means, physical, sacrodoctral means, that's a nice big word. It means by mean of social control. I'm quoting Weber here directly. I should have picked a better word. I'm just quoting Weber here directly. Or otherwise, which may be placed at the disposal of officials. If there's certain levels of coercion coercion that state actors can have, administrators can have. They can either have it themselves by saying you can do it, or I can use authority, put pressure on you to get other actors to do it, or I can directly use force, or call the police or the other actors to make you obey. I can issue fines, I can issue regulation things, I can put you in jail. The bureaucrat himself won't put you in jail. They will call the police. Again, I like to talk about the famous Eric Gardner shooting in New York City. You know why Eric Gardner was shot, don't you? The black man that was shot in New York City, 15 times. Why was he shot?
He was selling illegal cigarettes or something?
Yeah, but he was also selling soda. Illegal cigarettes, because illegal cigarettes because they're not being taxed. No tax on it, therefore the city and state is not getting money. Okay? But his store was also selling soda, the 32-ounce cup sodas. Mayor Bloomberg bans 30. The cops went into the store for the purpose of telling him to stop selling the soda. And they noticed the cigarettes were being sold there, and they didn't have stamp things. So they arrested him for that. And that's when he resisted arrest. And then if you resist arrest against police officers, regardless of what color they are, they would shoot you. Because Mr. Gardner was a big person. He was a big person. And the cops were kind of smaller people. And then if they start struggling, the cop always pulls a gun. To protect themselves. So therefore, why don't you? That's the whole story. When I was a kid in the 60s, before 1970s, to be a Rhode Island State Trooper, you had to be above 6 foot. You ever go look at Rhode Island State Trooper uniforms sometimes. They're hilarious. They look like SA uniforms. They're gray uniforms with the red linings and things, and they don't have badges, they have numbers. There's that famous movie, any of the Farley Brothers movies will have Rhode Island State cops involved. They'll show it. Like, remember that I, Me, and Marley, right? Or no, I, Me, and Lean. What's his name? Who's the crazy guy who did Mask in those movies? Jim Curry played a guy he was a Rhode Island cop whose wife cheated on him, and then he's Mr. Nice Guy, and then one day he cracks, becomes a sociopath. He's a Rhode Island State Trooper. This is the joke. Rhode Island State Troopers all look like Nazis because they have leather boots, gray uniforms, like riding boots, cowboy boots, horse riding boots. They have the leather Sam Brown belts. The only thing that is different from the Nazis is they don't have the German kind of weird field cap. They have instead what? The lemon squeezer Boy Scout Forest guy lemon squeezer hat. Okay, that's the big difference. And they always had three. Their standard weapon used to be 357 Magnums. Now they have 9mm Glocks or SKs. They had 357 Magnums, and they used to have to be able to at 50 yards. They used to be able to have to get a 90% grouping at 50 yards with a 357 Magnum. 6 feet tall, that, and usually an associate's degree or bachelor's degree. This was the rules of the old days of the cops and the night. Not even cops. Now the rule is, they argued the height rule is wrong, unfair, because women tend not to be 6 feet tall. So once they said, okay, no 6 feet tall, then therefore people 5'2", 5 foot came in there. Then all of a sudden they had the diversity hiring. And what happens then? This is the thing. Who's more likely going to pull a gun to shoot a threatening suspect? A big guy or a shorter person, or a man or woman? A shorter person. A smaller, weaker person is going to be 10 times, maybe even 15 times more likely to pull a gun. And women, 20 times more likely. Okay, this is the problem. The more equality you have in the police force, the more likely what you have is what? Cops using violence. Cops using... You get people who are not well trained, you get people who are often promoted because of political reasons. So therefore, what ends up happening is you get incidents like this. So back to Gardner. But Gardner's thing is an example of what? A stupid law that people put in there. No cups. Taxing of cigarettes. Anytime you make a law, you have to enforce that law. What does that mean? Every law is backed up with a gun. A policeman or a soldier with a gun backs up a law. Every law has the implicit, that's why justice herself has the sword. It has the implicit use of force, violence, for those who break the law, right? So therefore, that's the nature of these things. So therefore, the question of how much force is at disposal, bureaucracies have to determine. In fact, this is the funny part. Polish cops have very little use of force. I mean, Polish police are very not. American policemen are more judges and just. In other words, American policemen have more authority to settle disputes. They're peacekeepers. In other words, they act as officers of the court. They often have the. If there's a dispute between two people, a policeman can help settle it instead of going to the court. And what happens if you disobey? If he settles the dispute and now you ignore the policeman, you've now challenged legal authority, and it becomes you investigate it whether you broke the law or not. Okay. So therefore, policemen are an estimate of what we call, in the Anglo-Saxon word, policemen are in a way constables. Constables, which are what? They service the aspect of maintaining the peace, servicing disputes. They're both enforcers and adjudicators. They're not lawmakers, but they can adjudicate. Not for crimes. They can't try people for crimes. But they can do what? Civil disputes. They can act as an adjudicator for civil disputes. Can Polish police intervene in a civic dispute? No. In other words, your police are just militia. That's all they ever were. They were the militia. They're an armed people there to enforce the law when the authorities want the law to be enforced. You can ask the police to enforce now. If there's no law to enforce, right? If there's no law being broken, but someone is threatening somebody or intimidating something or doing something, can the police do anything in Poland? No. In America, can they do? Yes. They can protect people's private safety in that sense. If people are having their lives, property, or things are being threatened by someone, and even though there might be no jurisdictional right to do it, they can still act on that, of course. So therefore, this is the aspect of this. Last, but the methodological provision is made for regular, continual fulfillment of these duties and the execution of the corresponding rights. Only people who have the generally regulated qualifications are serve are employed. That means what? In a modern bureaucracy, you have to have the required skills, the required education, the required abilities. In other words, in ancient orders, often people who weren't, in older pre-modern forms, often people who they were the king's brother or the king's cousin. And a lot of political society is patronage, right? It's my friends and my buddies I hire and I like them. Even democracies work that way, patronage. The bureaucracy replaces patronage. Democracy bureaucracy tends to replace patronage. Bureaucracy is professionalization. In other words, the people with specific skills are now can only be hired in this thing. If you are regulating education, you must have an education degree in a working bureaucracy. In other words, this is why a lot of bureaucracies aren't really working, because often they hire people who don't have any knowledge of what they're regulating. Okay, hence the Polish system. The Polish system of higher education. Polish ministries are hilarious for this. And a lot of European ministries are like this. And it's Italy, in Greece. Usually the people in the ministries are, okay. If you're a bureaucrat and you're ambitious, right, you want to be in an important ministry. But if you're kind of incompetent, the government wants to put you in a place that you're going to do least harm, right? So what are the important ministries? What's the least important ministry? Therefore, the incompetent people or the not so good people or the politically hated are dumped into the lower important ministries. This is what we call, and this is much more corrupted system, okay? So this is very common in, let's say, Italy, Greece. Less so, it used to be Spain 20 years ago, but less so now, slightly changing. Portugal, same thing. France, yes, France very much so. The Latin countries, the Latin culture has this kind of attitude, okay? It's, this weird aspect. It used to be the original France under the Fourth Republic was good. But after starting in the 1990s onwards, the corruption of the system became that it just fell apart in that sense. So it continues here. Now the principles of the office, hierarchy, and levels of graded authority means a firm ordered system of super and subordination. Superordination and subordination. In other words, you have people with authorities, you have spheres of authority, sectors of authority, and subordination. People supervising you and people are subordinating you. Clear chains of command. And that there is supervision of the lower officers from the higher ones. The management of modern office is based upon written documents, the files, right? There's a lot of written documents, a lot of documentation requirements, which are preserved in their original or draft form. There is therefore a staff of subalterns officials, means smaller officials, clerks, and things like this, who oversees what? Who scribes all sorts of things. Little officials who write down and take notes on lots of things. So there's a lot of record keeping, lots of record keeping, of making sure notification are toward. The body of officials actively engaged in your public office, along with the representative apparatus of material implementation and the files, make up a bureau. In private enterprise, the bureau is often called the office. Okay, so the bureau in the government, the bureau. The bureau is an administrative entity, an office that deals with all things. It deals with what he says, those who are in charge of the public office, those who are representative of the system of the material implementation of it, and then those who oversees the files and the records. Okay. Office management, at least in all specified office management as such, management is a direct, distinctly modern, and usually presupposes thorough and expert training. This increasingly holds for the modern executive and employee of private enterprises as well, in the same manner as it holds for the state officials. So specific training of management, overseeing, in other words, the training of managers, public administration managers, and public firm management, the MBA degree. Look at this. You have in business, you have the MBA degree, right? In America, in England, you get a master's of management. Then there's also state administration, masters of public administration. These people who, in fact, you have in Poland, you have a law degree, but you also have what? The administration degree, which is like the law school. It's in the law school with it. It's law and administration. So you can graduate with your master's of administration, which means what? That you're going to be a bureaucrat. You're going to be a civil service bureaucrat. We did 4, sorry. 5, the office has fully developed official activity demands full working capacity of an official, irrespective of the facts that his obligatory time is in the Bureau may be firmly delimited. In the normal case, this is the only product of the long development in the public as well as the private office. Formerly, as in all cases, the normal state of affairs was reversed. Officials' business was discharged as a secondary activity. In other words, today's modern administration is treated as a primary work, okay? It's treated like, therefore it's like a full-time job, full-time employment, full-time your normal hours, okay? Whereas in the older times, it was often treated as secondary work, something you did after hours. Not a full-time job, but a part-time job that you occasionally did, okay? So the difference is that in older systems often will be that the administrative of civic town functions are not full-time job. It's usually somebody who has a job elsewhere, a teacher, who then has to go do another job once in a while, once every couple of weeks would go spend a couple hours doing this, okay? Election officials like this. Some official jobs are part-time, so that therefore the election officials in the U.S. are part-time jobs, so regardless of where you are. The big officer might be full-time job, but he will then, during election time, he needs about 300 people, 500 people sometimes in a county. So what happens is that he uses people from other departments, other bureaus, who then get an extra job, an extra money, extra pay for the period of the election, and can count those hours towards the pensum. That their years of service is part of their extra pensions. That's how this works. The management of the office follows general rules, and they're more or less stable, more or less exhaustive, and on which can be learned. Knowledge of those rules represents a special technical learning from which officials possess. It involves jurisprudence or administrative or business management. In other words, this is the idea of management, things like this, regulations, law, jurisprudence, regulation, law, the laws and regulations, but also what? Management procedures and business procedures of how do you operate, managing people. So these are the concepts of administration. Administration is very important because if you don't take it, administration delivers the services. It's the delivery of services that are needed. Much of government activity is giving people the services that they want. So this is managing people, the management of things. If you can't, one of the biggest failures of the Trump administration was his inability to manage the bureaucracy. Trump's model was always kind of let the people do it, let the administration. His business model was always set goals. And actually, this is a very popular business model. This is a very modern business model. You don't micromanage things. You don't micromanage decisions. You set up goals and things and let the people do what they want. Let the business, and if they do well, you reward them. If they don't do well, you fire them. Right? This is the classic kind of administrative. It's you reward things. But see, administration doesn't work this way. First, you can't fire them. Second of all, if you don't manage them, they will do what they want. And sometimes what they want is not what you want. So you needed someone. The problem with state function is you can't just, unless you totally change the system, unless you just wipe clean the administrative state, which maybe should happen because the administrative state is an outdated 18th century, 19th century construction that no longer works. No one in the business world does anymore. In other words, this is old thinking. This is Fordism. This is, they say Fordism, or that's the nice way of saying it. I forget the other name. What is the real name of Fordism? It's basically a bureaucratic, hierarchical, top-down managerial model, like a bureaucracy. This was a famous managerial model. It was popular. People called it Fordism. It was a different management style. Starting in the late 70s, early 80s, the new management style destroyed that. What happens? You create teams of people. In other words, everyone had a certain number, because in the Ford system, everyone becomes a cog. You do one little function. You type, you do this, you do that, and you're stuck in that little cog. You might become the manager of all the typists, and the division head of all typist people, but you're within a cog, a specific cog functional thing. This model argues that people have more than one talent, and it's wasting talent. You might also be a good, structural. You can do mathematics. You can be a calculator. You're in a typing pool right now, in charge of typing, but you can do math. In other words, if the accounting department needed someone to kind of deal with accounting, you could work with that on this issue. In other words, you can multitask. It saves money because I don't have to hire. I have one employee, not 5. I can downsize my staff, and then I focus my operational things on functionality, and then move people along to service the needed functions. This is how the revolution of the modern technological revolution in business model happened in the business world. Why doesn't government follow this? This was Al Gore in 1994, 1993, talked about reinventing government. And I was kind of like, okay, what he meant. And I first read the first draft of Reinventing Government. I thought he was going to mean, it sounded like he was going to do this. Look, the management, he talked about the critique of the bureaucratic manager and how outdated it was. And I think, oh God, we're going to have a reinvention. No. Just digitalization of the old monster. In other words, no real reform, because reform, this would actually mean, because the Democrats realized that the administrative employees became their political base. So if the Democratic leader decided to reform the bureaucracy, this would basically be cutting their own political throat. They weren't going to do that. So what happened is that they decided to just digitalize. And therefore what happened? More of the same, not less of the same. So therefore what happens here is you have to be very careful about this. What it means here. Sometimes administration, in other words, it doesn't have to be, Weber doesn't understand the real revolution of management that's happening. There has been revolutions in management. And the state needs to catch up with this, or it's going to be backwards. In other words, the state functions, government functions, are still, for the most part, backwards and inefficient. And this also explains why states are inefficient. Because they're acting in this bureaucratic... In other words, if a business operated like this, managerial-wise, they would be uncompetitive, non-competitive. Today, states are not competitive because they're bureaucratic... Remember, there's another thing. Power. Let us have no foolishness about power. Power is not an ever-increasing thing. The more power you exercise doesn't always give you more benefit. There's going to be a point of optimality, a Pareto optimality moment of power. And in fact, it doesn't begin with, in other words, states if you have no power, that means it's very bad. Why? Because you can't do anything. You can't even do the services you might need to do, protect people. If you have no power, you can't predict people. But if you have too much power, you're paralyzed. And you become totally inefficient, and it kind of reverts the chaos. In other words, what happens when you have too much power, you become so powerful, doing so many things, so many functions, you're just overwhelmed, overpowered, and the system breaks down. And it reverts kind of to the same kind of chaos, anarchy, that exists when you had no power. So, infinite power does not lead to better government. In other words, power has a moment of optimality, and that if you keep on going, you're going to have negative outcomes. So therefore, this is a problem here regarding to understand this. Now, the next thing is law. Now, law here this is both what? This is tool of the state and the regime. These are codes of laws that serve, in other words, authority, not only of the state. Someone is using the big microphone in there, turned it on, didn't realize it was on, and was talking right into it. So in early modern, is it me? Us? What's?
It's outside.
Hello? Hello there? Okay. In other words, in early modern Europe, the growth of legal and law institutions owe much to the monarchies. In other words, monarchies gave the institutions of law and those things their reality. In modern democracies, of course, written constitutions and these things became fundamental. And he goes, and I'm going to bring Tocqueville here, and you can look at the thing. Tocqueville makes a very important point about law, about three factors that maintain democratic republics in America, right? This is the unique history and configuration of the country, its laws, and its manners, codes, and effectual in the broadest sense of terms. And it argues the last of this, what's called political culture, is actually the most critical. So law cannot only be, laws not only are the legal laws, the legal structures, but also political culture, the customs and mores and social habits. These are as much play of this. We need to talk about common law, civil law. You can look at the thing of this. Common law, civil law, two different legal systems, different approaches to this. I'll leave you can look at the specifics in the PDF on the thing. The common law, civil law structure here is like this. And there's like three things that I give it so that you can understand that role of juries. In Anglo-common law, the role of juries are judges. The inquisitional system of the common law. Civil law and common law have two different political cultures. Produces two different political cultures. Law, again, is like administration. These are the rules and instruments by which states operate from. These are the policies. These are the issues. These are the structures that shape things. Education, well, this is clear. Education and culture. Education is the quality of public education. This is the idea of what? Now, this is the famous case. Education, state versus civil society. It can be state versus civil society, private, or it can be private or religious. In other words, the civil society one is private. It can be either religious or secular. Now, every education has at least three possible functionalities. And there's a fourth one. It didn't get bolded for some reason. Why? It's the four functions. One, civic education. In other words, it teaches people what you know to be effective citizens. This is the education that every citizen needs to understand the system he lives in, understand the system, how to be a good system, knows what the values are. You're taught the values, what to believe, what the society wants you to believe about what the system is like. This is civic education. Civic education inculcates you the values, inculcates you the understanding of the political system and how it works, and your function and the function within it. That's one aspect of this public education. Second aspect is leadership or elite replacement. In other words, in any political system, there's going to be important people, elites or managers or things like this within the system that need to be replaced. So you need to train people particularly in a bureaucratic society, you're going to need to train the new bureaucrats. So therefore you need what? Leadership training, the training of leaders. Who's going to be the leaders in the society? The training of the elites. Next aspect, employment of skills and tasks. Employment and skill tasks. The skills and jobs. Again, this is where most bureaucrats get their knowledge, in the employment and skills. In other words, you need to have the knowledge and skills that when you graduate with these knowledge and skills, the government can hire you for the job they need you to do. And also the employees can hire you to, the skills and knowledge will be the basis by which you learn to have new skills, learn knowledge that will allow you to do new functions, and therefore this makes you employable. Last, self-improvement and entertainment. Education is self-improvement and entertainment. And this is, by the way, most important for democratic societies. Democratic societies will want self-improvement, so therefore people want to improve themselves, self-empowerment, but also what? Entertainment. How can I say this? How to keep lower unemployment. In other words, if you're in university, you don't count as unemployed. So if more people come to university, I reduce the unemployment figures. I can delay entry into employment for 3 to 4 years. So even if I'm only entertaining you and you learn nothing, the delaying of you into the workforce may be useful for the government or officials. So that in the sense of this way. These are examples of elite institutions, Oxford, Cambridge, the elite military schools like St. Cyr in France or the German Kriegsmarine Academy of Tension, or then famous de Gaulle's the École Nationale things. We'll just finish on this thing. This is the education culture. Culture, this is important because entertainment and culture is as much of a thing. This is soft power in many ways. It's states telling values, giving you the aspects of things, of our identity as a nation, maintaining our civic identity, civic conception of who we are. It reinforces aspects of it, but it also allows entertainment and also as an aspect of entertainment. Sports is a famous form of culture in that sense. Competitive sports and that's things, again, it's entertainment, but also what? It's also an aspect of social behavior and education. So again here, economics, this is the last one, and economics is simply just the economic means. These are economic statecraft, this is what we use as per policy goals. It's foreign aid, travel, money, money, things like this. Economic statecraft, properly understood, is the use of economic means to pursuit of any end sought by the states and leaders. In other words, given we have capitalist market frameworks, the market needs regulations and enforcement mechanisms. So you need to have the role of enforcing the market and controlling, making the market work, patrolling it. Without regulators and enforcing, markets don't work. Okay? So therefore, this is the breakdown. If you have anarchy, anarchic markets are rather inefficient and unstable. So having a regulated market, an enforceable market, makes it a more effective market. So therefore, the proper economic statecraft is making the market effective, not overburdening it with regulation. Makes it, overburdening it with in other words, again, regulation is very much regulation enforcement is kind of a Pareto optimality problem. Too little leads to corruption and abuse by some powers, but then too much can overburden the system. Okay, so therefore, like this, monetary systems. And also the mechanisms of monetary systems, like money, capital markets, banks, and other monetary aspects of policy. These are an aspect of economic policy. In other words, money supply, central bank, no central bank. Are you going to have a currency control, not control? Are you going to use outside currencies or inside currencies? Stock markets, bond market, financial markets, and those things. Aspects of production and industry. That's another aspect of this. Another aspect of this, we'll finish up with the last three. Resource management, natural and also human. This is very much about training of resource management. The resources you have is very much an important thing in politics. You have to be able to have resources to be able to produce. You're going to need to build, you're going to have to make sure that people can enjoy their lives and live their lives successfully. So you have to have resources that they can live their lives. And make sure the resources are able to preserve, in other words, the resources necessary in order to secure your state externally from other actors. So that therefore there's natural resources and human resources. And also man-made constructed resources, okay? Energy, food, resources, or etc. Production and procurement of these things. That's an aspect of the economy. Production and procurement and trade, exchange. And last but not least, reform and modernization efforts. In other words, if you're not developed yet, you want to modernize, the modernization efforts. In many ways, from going from communism to capitalist is transition from one type of system to another type of system. This required both reform and modernization efforts. Okay, these are the forms of economic policy. So with that. We're at the end of the first 4 tools. We'll come next week. We'll finish the tools up, okay? And